Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in.
Okay, happy Saturday everybody. I hope you're having a restful weekend. The conversation on most lips these last few days is, of course, the US presidential debate. I'm not from the US, and more importantly, domestic US affairs is outside of the scope of this channel, so I will give leave to others more qualified than myself to speak on this matter. However, the PRC was watching the debate and the wider presidential race closely as well, so we do need to discuss Beijing's reaction to it. But first, it's worth briefly noting the points each candidate made regarding China in the debate. After being asked a question about the nation's opioid crisis, former President Donald Trump accused China of killing the US, expressing, quote, "China is going to own us if you keep allowing them to do what they are doing to us as a country. They are killing us as a country, Joe, and you can't let that happen. You're destroying our country." End quote. He later added that China's leader, as well as Russian leader Vladimir Putin, didn't respect or fear the US president. Quote, "They have nothing going with this gentleman, and he's going to drive us into World War III." End quote. Trump also criticized the current administration for the US deficit with China. President Joe Biden rejected the point, saying that the US was running its, quote, lowest trade deficit with China since 2010, end quote. The US trade deficit with China last year was $279 billion US, according to US Census Bureau data. Indeed, the lowest level since 2010, but still a very large deficit. On trade, both candidates have been trying to appear tough on China and calling for protection of American jobs. Trump previously said he'd raise tariffs by 10% across the board and indicated that he'd put taxes as high as 60% on products exported by China. Biden's administration has largely kept in place Trump-era tariffs and announced new ones, including tariffs as high as 100% on electric vehicles, a recent announcement which we covered at the time. Now let's move to the reaction of Chinese commentators and state media. The general reaction was one of ridicule of the debate specifically and Western democracy generally. This attitude was likely best represented by Hu Xijin, an influential pundit and ex-Global Times editor-in-chief, who wrote on X, despite it being banned for most people in China, quote, "Personal attacks, hazy memory, mocking each other. This debate was very entertaining for many Chinese people. Objectively speaking, the low-quality performance of these two old men was a negative advertisement for Western democracy." End quote. Popular Chinese blogger Ho Sha Moonlight, with 4 million followers, wrote, quote, "It doesn't matter what the debate was about. The key is the witty and flexible Trump successfully highlighted the old and dying appearance of the sleeping king." End quote. Chu Mingyu expressed to their over 1.9 million Weibo followers, quote, "This just points out the fundamental problem of American democracy. Americans don't elect a president, but someone who is more suitable to play the president on TV. In tonight's debate, Trump lied and talked nonsense, but most TV viewers didn't notice it. However, Biden's old age and stuttering greatly reduced his score." End quote. State-run financial media outlet Cailian wrote yesterday, quote, "This chaotic rhythm almost dominated the entire debate, and many people lamented. One has Alzheimer's disease and the other is mentally ill. They are really evenly matched." End quote. Now, these were the public reactions. How Beijing leadership reacted in private was likely much more nuanced. Both candidates are, or have been, president, and both have put in very capable senior officials who have, to varying degrees, been tough on China. The bilateral hawkishness towards China in Congress, too, isn't going to change, whoever is in the White House. Diao Daming, a professor of international relations at Beijing's Renmin University, speaking to Hong Kong-based South China Morning Post, said that China will face a lose-lose situation no matter who wins the election, expressing yesterday, quote, "This election will not alter the domestic and international issues facing the United States, nor will it change the strategic direction the US has already demonstrated towards China." End quote. Sun Changhao, a fellow and head of the US-EU program at the Center for International Security and Strategy at China's prestigious Beijing-based Tsinghua University, agreed, adding that, quote, "Neither major US party is offering any fresh look on how to deal with China. It's all about strategic competition. Regardless of who wins, this general direction will remain unchanged." End quote. Adding, quote, "The two candidates differ only in their techniques or tactics of how to implement this strategy. For China, the outcome is the same. harmful competition will continue, and there is no clear preference or significant difference between Biden and Trump, end quote. He told the South China Morning Post that Beijing now had experience in dealing with both men and would, quote, prepare for both scenarios, end quote. Lu Xiang, a research fellow in U.S. studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, told the same outlet that uncertainty in U.S.-China relations will likely increase. Quote, China will do what it can to establish some certainty amid the uncertainty, but Beijing cannot control how the structural changes could evolve, end quote. Next up, tensions in the South China Sea between the Philippines and the PRC continue to boil. I know we've spent a lot of time on these tensions recently, and parts of the coverage may feel repetitive, but this may well be one of the most dangerous flashpoints in the world today, and it's important that we follow the developments as they happen, even if it is just posturing in Beijing, Manila, and Washington. By the way, if you're getting some value from today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit the like button, and subscribing and sharing is also a huge help. The current big questions around these tensions are how will the Philippines continue to resupply the Sierra Madre at Second Thomas Shoal, how aggressive is Beijing willing to be to frustrate these efforts, and whether the US will assist Manila. This week, the Philippines ambassador to the US said that they are not asking the US for help in the resupply missions, expressing, quote, we would like to be able to supply our own soldiers on our own without really bringing in a third party because, as I said, this is our territory, which we've made very clear from the very beginning, and so we have not asked the United States for any assistance whatsoever, end quote. But as one commentator bluntly expressed this week, something has to give, and soon, it seems. On Wednesday, the U.S. Defense Secretary had a call with his Philippines counterpart, in which he, quote, reaffirmed the ironclad U.S. commitment to the Philippines following dangerous actions on June 17th by the People's Republic of China against lawful operations by the Philippines to deliver humanitarian supplies to service members stationed at the BRP Sierra Madre, end quote. The same day, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan made the same commitment to his counterpart. US-based The Washington Post, citing unnamed officials in Washington, reported that the United States will hold a joint maritime exercise with the Philippines in the coming weeks as a show of support. Quote, the exercise was pre-planned and is not intended to escalate tensions with China, said a U.S. Indo-Pacific Commander representative, end quote. The piece continues, quote, since the incident, here referring to the most recent resupply mission resulting in injuries to Philippine sailors, U.S. officials at the highest levels have been debating an appropriate response, said one official in Asia. Something needs to be done, said the official who works on security issues. Do we want to commit to something that could spiral out of control? That's very much a factor at play. The level of anxiety on this issue among countries in this region is very high, said a second U.S. official. So the Chinese have miscalculated here, they added, end quote. On Thursday, Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell spoke with Vice Foreign Minister, let's check his characters actually, Ma Zhaoxu. Is that first tone for, fourth tone first tone? Zhaoxu. Where are your characters? Zhaoxu. Oh, no, completely wrong. Ma Zhaoxu. Okay. On Thursday, Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell spoke with Vice Foreign Minister Ma Zhaoxu, and according to the US readout, Campbell, quote, raised serious concerns regarding the PRC's destabilizing actions in the South China Sea, including at Second Thomas Shoal, and affirmed the United States' support for freedom of navigation and overflight and the peaceful resolution of disputes, consistent with international law. The Deputy Secretary also reiterated that U.S. commitments to the Philippines under the Mutual Defense Treaty remain ironclad, end quote. The U.S. is thus, through multiple high-level signals, telling Beijing that it will defend its ally in the event of an armed attack. Concerningly, however, yesterday, a PRC Ministry of Defense spokesperson bluntly expressed, quote, as for the U.S. frequently using the U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty to threaten China, it is completely ineffective, end quote. Adding, quote, this issue is none of the U.S.'s business. The U.S. is inciting and supporting the Philippines side's infringement and provocation, and is very dangerous and extremely irresponsible, end quote. In an interview with the US-based Financial Times, the Philippines ambassador to the US, Jose Manuel Ramondes, warned of a region-wide global conflict over the South China Sea reef dispute, expressing, quote, "It's the most dangerous time. Weapons of mass destruction are very real. You have several countries, major powers, that have large arsenals of nuclear power. If anything happens, the entire Asian region will be completely included." End quote. Interestingly, he added that in the event of a conflict in another part of Asia not related to the Second Thomas Shoal, Manila would let the United States use its military bases, expressing, quote, "If our defense establishment finds it possible for us to allow them to use the sites to defend Taiwan because it will affect us, then most likely we will agree." End quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. Have a good Saturday. I may actually be doing an extra episode tomorrow because there's been so much from this week, we may need to do an extra episode. So I will either see you tomorrow or on Monday.